Okay, everyone. This is the second part of our lectures with Unit 17, Social Movements. This time we will be talking about social movements and the members of social movements. So a social movement refers to any social group with leadership, organization, and an ideological commitment to promote or resist social change. A social movement must have those three things to be a social movement, and this is a type of collective behavior. Now, Armand Mauss identified four stages which social movements tend to go through. This is the life of the social movement, if you will. The first stage occurs when the public defines a problem. So enough people become concerned about a thing, say a polluted river, that some people decide that they're going to do something about that. And that leads to the second step. So people organize. They decide to have meetings. They might get petitions signed. They pick leaders and all of that. So and within that phase, most social change occurs during that phase. They have rallies, they convince legislatures to pass laws, etc. After that second phase, the movement becomes bureaucratized. See Mike Mitchell's Iron Love Oligarchy, which we'll talk about in a minute, and Weber's talkings about bureaucracy, right? So the social movement becomes like those six qualities that Weber talked about. It gets rules, it gets regulations, it might get some employees, it gets an office, etc. So the Save the River campaign gets an office downtown and a couple of employees. And then that third phase and also that second phase might take quite some time to happen. But eventually the movement will begin to decline. So no one's really concerned about the river anymore. The river was cleaned up, and we eventually the attention that the Save the River campaign can get kind of goes away. So either at that moment, the Save the River organization has to find a new problem. Maybe they decide to try to clean up the woods, or they try to clean up a different river, or the movement falls apart and they effectively go out of business, if it were. Now, Mitchell's Iron Law of Oligarchy states, as alluded to in the previous slide, that all organizations will become bureaucratic oligarchies eventually. So all organizations will develop their leadership, and the organization will be led by that leadership with their rules and regulations. Now, some organizations do this faster than others, especially if the organization is ideologically opposed to being either bureaucratic or oligarchical. Um, so an anarchist collective is less likely to do this, but a state uh, organization, a the Department of Agriculture, for example, would do it pretty quickly, maybe almost immediately. Um, or it collapses. So if the organization doesn't last long enough to become a bureaucratic oligarchy, then it will dissolve. So let's talk about the members of social movements themselves and a little bit more about individual social movements. So, because society is constantly changing, new social movements and different opportunities for activism are constantly emerging. So, whenever there is a social movement, there need to be members of that social movement. Whenever there is a cause, there's usually a movement. So, activism is any activity intended to bring about social change. Sometimes people have the misconception that activism doesn't exist anymore, and that's entirely not true. Sometimes people say, oh, there aren't activists the way they used to be in the 60s or something like that. Well, no, there are activists today. Black Lives Matter movement people, they are activists. And there are all kinds of different activists. There are activists that directly oppose each other, for example. Now, activists can be either professional or amateur. Um, Most activists are probably amateur, but there are some professional activists. Union organizer is an example of a professional activist. They are paid to do what they do. Social worker, some types of social worker anyway, are professional activists. Community organizers might be hired by a community organization, like our hypothetical Save the River organization. Now, there are reasons why movements want to have these kinds of people. Sometimes social movements are criticized for having, quote, paid activists. But this is a need of social movement organizations, and they raise money and they pay people to do the work that they aren't able to do themselves. Um, so, for example, whenever you have to put out a mailer to 10,000 people, whenever you have to knock on certain numbers of doors, sure, volunteers can do part of that work, but it takes someone whose full-time job it is to make all those parts work to really take an organization to the next level. Now, there are two types of activism, or social change, if it were. We have regressive activism or movements and progressive activist or movements. So some social movements are regressive in that they resist social change, they attempt to maintain the status quo, or they tend to go back to an earlier form of social order. Uh, Trump's Make America Great Again slogan is an ideal example of regressive social movement. That whole thing is dedicated to making America, it says it right there, make America great again, right? Make America great the way it was before. Um, Regardless of whether this is a reflection of what reality actually was or not, is neither here nor there. But that's what regressive movements look like. Progressive movements, on the other hand, promote forward-thinking social change. So progressive movements want to change something, and they want to, uh, from their perspective, make society better in a way that it hasn't been before. Now, do not get confused and think that regressive necessarily means conservative and progressive necessarily means liberal or what we often call progressive even. These are not necessarily tied to the right or left wing. So yes, many conservative movements are regressive. So uh, there are many, many examples on the Republican side. But there are certain left-aligned clauses that are regressive too. So an environmentalist organization is usually regressive. They want to preserve the world or the environmental state in a way that it once was. And even those are prone to imagining a world that used to be that didn't actually used to be. Then progressive movements, again, often left wing, but not necessarily. Uh, the gun uh, the gun rights lobby is actually a pretty good example of this. There have never been fully unrestricted access to all types of weapons, but there are lobbyists in that with that interest that would like you to buy basically any kind of weapon you would want. That's never been the case. That would be a progressive action. So what I want you to do is to read the article on the alt-right that I posted on the discussion boards, read those prompts over and discuss the prompt. I really like this article. It is it's really interesting, and it shows a group that is growing in the United States that we need to pay attention to. And also, you have a vocabulary review due this week, and that will help you prepare for your test next week. So, with no further ado, I will wish you happy study.